It's important, and it happened to me in basic training, to break down all the soldiers that are constituent elements because you don't know what you're getting. It's a mixed bag, and that's what Cage is doing now. Marching across the fields of the training bay brings back some memories. Memories I'm not sure that I want. While half my brain scans the surrounding grasslands, the other begins to wander, remembering the faces of all those lost comrades left broken and bleeding on a dozen battlefields. I look at the others in front of me, fanning out to sweep a track ahead, and wonder how many of them are going to die. And then I get to wondering how much of it will be my fault when they do. I picked them. I plucked them out of their cells and held a gun to their heads, so to speak. I'm also the one who's training them, teaching them what they'll need to know to survive. If I fail them, if they die, then some of it must be down to me, mustn't it? All those other bodies, all those dead faces that haunt my dreams, they weren't my fault, I'm sure of that. I wasn't the one who put them there. I wasn't the one who was responsible for them. But these last chancers, these are my team, chosen by me, trained by me, and I suppose led by me when the time comes. The weight of that dawns on me, and my hands begin to tremble. I faced horrors, blade to blade and gun to gun, that you wouldn't dream of in your worst nightmares, and not given it a second thought. And here I am, shaking like a new recruit in the first firefight. I drop back a bit so the others won't notice, pulling the map out of my leg pocket to make out I'm checking something. The paper shakes in my hand and I feel my heart flutter. There's something wrong. This doesn't happen to me. I've killed more people than most have met. So why am I getting a massive attack of the jitters in an Emperor Dam training bay? Okay, rest up for a few minutes while I check something. I call to the others. Just as the first of them, Isle, reaches a hedge line across our advance. They drop into the grass, and I walk a little ways off, down to a shallow hollow, and dump my gun on the ground. Spots start dancing in front of my eyes, and my whole body is trembling now. I sit down heavily, my legs pretty much buckling under me. The straps of my pack are tightening across my chest, and I wrench them off and let it fall behind me. Every muscle in my body seems to be in spasm at once. I just can't stop clenching and unclenching my fist. This isn't just nerves, I scream at myself. This is a sign of coughs, some kind of pox I've caught. Perhaps in that emperor forsaken prison. My breathing is ragged, my head swimming. A shadowy figure wavers in front of me, and I can just about hear what they're saying over the hissing and pounding in my ears. I wonder vaguely why the sky's behind them. Are you okay, sir? I dimly hear Tanya's voice. Name's Last Chance, I slur back, trying to focus on her face, which sways from side to side. No rations for anyone this evening. I feel someone grabbing at my shoulders, firmly, and the face leers into mine, making me recoil with surprise. Hold him still, snaps Stronenberg, and his hands clamp down on my legs and arms, pinning me down on the grass. I taste something metallic in my mouth and gag. There's an explosion to my left, and I hear screaming. Sounds like Quidlin or Franks. It's a bit unclear. My eyes are playing up. One moment I'm lying there on the grass in the field. The next, and I'm in some kind of ruined building. Bullets tearing the place up and down. I get dizzier. A surge of frustration fuels my anger, threatening to rip me apart from the inside. Open your mouth! Open your damn mouth, Cage! Stronberg shouts at me, and I feel his fingers on my jaw, and I realize my teeth are welded together. Dolan's blood! Somebody take that knife off him before he does any more damage! He snaps at the others, who I can just about see around and between flickers of the dark ruined city. One of them pulls it from the cramped fingers of my right hand. I didn't even realize I was holding one. Something wet is dribbling down my throat and chest. I try to reach up to touch it, but my arm is held firm. What the frag is he screaming about? I hear Strelly asking. I don't know who he's talking about. I can't hear any screaming. I try to sit up and look around to find who it is. For Emperor's sake, we're supposed to be in the middle of a battle here. If someone's making that much racket, they'll have hell to pay when I'm feeling a bit better. I feel a sharp stinging pain in my face, that brings tears to my eyes and makes my ears ring. This is just getting better and better, I hear Tross shouting. What's he talking about? I'm just feeling a bit ill, that's all. If they just give me some room, I'd be all right. I try to wave them away, to give me some air. Something heavy lands in my chest, pinning me down. I try to heave it off, but a stabbing pain in my leg distracts me. Suddenly, all the strength leaves me. I can feel it seeping out, starting at my fingers and toes and spreading up my body. A wave of panic hits me, as I can no longer feel my heartbeat, and a moment later, everything goes black. Combat fatigue. Lieutenant Kage is suffering from combat fatigue. I don't think they have a word for it in the future. What set him over the edge was the fact that he didn't know if his soldiers would make it or not. That's what set him over the edge. Before, he had no real responsibility other than being in charge of the team. But now, he's sending people into combat. When I open my eyes, it's to a vision of insanity. Right in front of my face are dozens of glass lenses, clicking in and out of arrangement of tubes. A bright light shining through, almost blinding me. Tiny chains and gears spin back and forth rhythmically, accompanied by a low ceiling. Little cantilevers wobble erratically, pumping a dark green fluid through a maze of transparent tubes. My nostrils catch a mix of oil and soap, along with the distinctive smell of blood. I try to turn my head, but I can't. I feel something hard and cold around my face, like bars running across my chin and forehead, and down my cheeks to a block under my jaw. As sensation slowly returns, I can feel more restraints. Glancing down past my chin, I can see heavy metal clamps across my chest and legs, held in place with serious-looking padlocks. I can feel things in my arms and throat, piercing the flesh in half a dozen places. I turn my attention back to the apparatus around my head, my eyes tracing cords and cables that disappear into the mass of machinery. My ears catch the squeaking of a badly oiled wheel somewhere in the mechanism. I open my mouth to say something, but my jaw can't move, and it just ends up as a cross between a growl and a moan. The lights in the machine flicker and go off, leaving me bathed in a lambent yellow glow. With a whir, the apparatus pulls back from my face, its lenses and levers folding on themselves, retracting to a small cube that disappears from view above my head. I can see the ceiling and far wall, brick painted in a light gray. I hear a door latch, and then the sound of a door closing to my right, and a tech priest enters my field of vision. He wears light green robes, splattered with dark patches of what looks like blood. A heavy cog and skull sigil hangs from a silver chain around his neck. His face is old and lined, creased heavily like a discarded shirt. A variety of tubes and wires sprout from his neck and head, lost from view over his shoulders. In his hands he carries what looks like a gun, with a needle instead of a barrel. "Am I audible to you?" he asks, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Blink your eyes for an affirmative." It takes me a moment to realize he wants to know if I can hear him. I blink once for yes. "Am I visible to you?" he asks next, moving to the left side of the bed I'm bound to. Another blink. I hear the door opening and closing again. I see Stronenberg walk the other side of me. He exchanges a look with a tech priest, who nods once, and then turns his attention back to me, dark brown eyes regarding me clinically. "So it is mental, not physical," Stronenberg says as much to himself as me and the tech priest. He hasn't looked at me, busying himself instead with a sheaf of papers hanging from a hook at the foot of the bed. I lie there helpless, as a newborn, my mind starting to race as I recover my wits. What the hell has happened to me? Why did Stronenberg mean by mental, not physical? Surely I've just caught a dose of something. All I did was get a bit shaky and dizzy. Nothing too serious about that. I want to ask him what the frag is going on, but before it comes out as a meaningless mumble, my teeth between my teeth, it attracts his attention, and he just comes and stands by my left arm. There's no point in trying to speak, Kage, he tells me, not kindly. You're in a restraint harness for your own safety and ours. You really are a good fighter, aren't you? One blink, yes, I am. No one on board fully understands what happened to you. We don't have anyone who has much more than a cursory study of this area of madness, he continues, turning and pulling a chair to the bedside before sitting down. I can just about see him out of the corner of my eye. You're suffering from some kind of battle induced vapors leading to self destructive trauma. Do you understand what I'm saying, Kage? No blink. He could be speaking in foul orc speak for all I know. He chews on his lip for a moment, obviously in thought, choosing his words. Okay, I'll start with the basics, he says with a sigh. You're insane, Kage. I try to laugh, but the jaw restraint constricts my throat, making me cough instead. When I recover, I direct a vicious frown at Stronenberg. Your years of intense fighting have allowed dangerous amounts of ill vapors to build up in certain parts of your brain, affecting your mental state, he carries on explaining patiently and slowly. Something that happened in the training bay triggered another release of these vapors, which have begun eroding your sense of judgment, consciousness, and self preservation. Are you following me? No blink. I never did know that much about medicine, and all this mad talk of vapors eating my brain sounds like Grok's crap. I mean, I'd feel it if my brain was melting. The symptoms you displayed in the training bay all point towards the serious battle psychosis developing since your suicide attempt, he tells me. Suicide attempt? What the frag is he talking about? I've never thought about killing myself. Not in all those long months and years of fighting, and locked alone in one cell. Suicide is for the weak, the ones that have nothing useful left to offer. I'll never kill myself, Emperor. What kind of soldier does he take me for? You tried to slit your own throat, he confirms, seeing the disbelief in my eyes. Luckily, the madness vapors had also affected your ability to control your muscles, so you just ended up slashing your jaw. You severed a tendon, which is why we've had to bind your jaw shut until the muscles knit together again. In a flash of memory, I recall the metallic taste of blood in my mouth during the seizure, and my teeth locking in place. I think we caught. I think we caught this. I think we caught this before too much damage could be done to your brain, says biologist Alan Thax. Oh, I think we caught this before too much damage could be done to your brain. And biologist Alan Thrax, wow. Biologist Alan Thrax, he indicates the other man who is still regarding me dispassionately, which he might look at an interesting specimen, was to perform the surgery and release the vapors before they became fatal. Surgery? What in the Emperor's name have these blood fiends done to me? I guess my expression must show what's passing through my mind as Stronenberg lays a hand on my arm to try to comfort me, I guess. I flick irritably away with my fingers, one of the few parts of me that I can actually move. It's a fairly standard practice, though not common, he tries to reassure me. Biologist Alanthrax has performed it several times before, with almost 50% of his charges making full recoveries. It is a simple matter of temporarily removing a portion of your skull, making an incision into the affected area to release the vapors, and then bone welding the cranium back in place. You stuck a knife in my brain? I wanted to scream. For Emperor's sake, you bastard. You stuck a knife in my brain. I'd rather take my chance with the madness than have these sawbones chopping me to bits. I try to push myself up, but there's no give, and the restraints at all. Pain shoots through my face as I clench my teeth and snarl at Stronenberg. Emperor, damn it! I didn't go through hell and back with the colonel to die on some damn surgery table under the knife of a jumped-up tech priest who's got more in common with the knife than with me. How could the colonel let them do this to me? He can't believe in all this garbled nonsense. What does he think he's doing putting me under the knife? Mother of Dolan, I've seen as many men die at the hands of cretins like these from bullets and blades. I've seen men dying in agony from rotting wounds cut into them by these sadistic bloodmongers. You need to remain calm, Kage, Stronenberg tells me, standing up, concerned across his face. You need to allow your body The chance to heal. He glances at Alanthrax, who steps forward with a gun-like needle. I try to spit a curse at the Emperor Dampere them as he pushes it into my forearm and squeezes down on the trigger. As before, sleep washes gently over me. I guess that's kind of the nice progression about the series is Cage starts off more or less not really insane, he's just a criminal and now he's an insane criminal and then there's a progression throughout each of the books which I do like actually because I was beginning to be afraid that he's just the same old Cage from the last book. I spent another week in the infirmary, locked down to that table. To make matters worse, we must have dropped into the warp, because my nightmares start again. Pumped up on Alanthrax's witch's brew, my dreams are plagued by the dead of my past, just like last time. Men and women missing limbs, their heads sheared in half, entrails open to the world, wanderingly aimlessly around my bed, staring at me with accusing eyes. I feel like I'm in a waking nightmare, strapped up tight with those cretins, encircling around and around me. All the time, the two children I saw in Court Norum stand at the foot of the bed and just stare at me. Their eyes say it all. You killed us, they say. You burnt us. I want to scream at them to leave me alone, but I was just following orders. It was them or me. But the lock on my jaw stops me. Not once does the colonel visit me. Not while I'm awake, at least. For the whole week, it seems like I've died and gone to hell. Feels like I've died and I've gone to hell. got eyes on my head. The suspicion fear in my eyes of the team when I next meet them. It's just before lights down. They're sprawled in their bunks, and I stand there, feeling their eyes upon me. I look at Stronenberg, who meets my hard gaze without a trace of guilt. I felt like an invader. Such is their hostility. Training will resume tomorrow, I tell them. None of them replies. I don't blame them. I wouldn't know what to say either. I turn and take a step towards the door to my chamber. Excuse me, last chance. I hear Quidlin blurt from behind me. Colonel Shaver said we were to assemble in the briefing room after breakfast tomorrow. The colonel? I asked, turning around. He carried on with the training while you were. Isle leaves it unsaid. Strapped to a bed in case you turned into a raving lunatic and tried to kill yourself or someone else, is what he doesn't say. And what did the colonel have to say about me? I asked, suddenly worried. What's to become of me if the colonel is taking direct control of the training again? I feel the horrid sensation of failure begin to well up inside me. Well, he can't have me shipped back to Viniclarum. So now we're in the warp and underway. I don't think. But there's bound to be a brig aboard the Laurels of Glory. And he could just as easily bang me up there for the duration. Or perhaps he'll finish it, put a bolt through my head, as an example to the others. They shake their heads and shrug in response. Nothing, last chance, Tanya tells me. He said nothing about you. Very well, I reply, keeping my voice level. I want you all looking sharp tomorrow morning. Now is the time. We have to stay focused and disciplined. I walk out and into my room. I hear them start to chatter again, and I'm about to close the door when a random thought occurs to me. I stick a head through the door frame. Does Schaefer have a name? I ask them, like the ones I gave you. They exchange glances, half smiles on their lips. Yes, last chance, he does. He said it as Colonel. Figures, I think to myself, nodding, closing the door. As I do so, I catch a snippet of what Tross says next. We set a double watch tonight, he says to the others. That psycho's not coming anywhere near me while I'm asleep. At first, I'm tempted to wrench the door open and pound the mouthy meathead to the deck for saying that, but I stop short. I sit down on my bunk and can't stop a smile creeping across my face. That's one lesson they'll never forget, I reckon. I lie down on my bunk and close my eyes, waiting for sleep and the nightmares to come again. The next morning, the colonel sends an armsman to wake me up early. I dress hurriedly and follow him up to Schaefer's chamber. He's waiting for me, immaculately dressed despite the early hour, clean-shaven and bright-eyed. The armsman closes the door behind me without a further word. The colonel looks at me for a long time, his eyes unwavering, stripping away layer after layer of my soul. I begin to fidget under his gaze. The circular scar on the right side of my head itches like a mad, and it's all I can do to keep myself standing at attention and not scratch at it. One more mistake, Kage, he says slowly, and I am finished with you. I say nothing. There's nothing to say. I am watching you more closely than ever, he warns me, eyes not moving. I will not tolerate the slightest slip-up on your part, nor the merest hint that your treatment was unsuccessful. Do I make myself clear, Kage? Perfectly, sir, I answer quickly, dread knotting in my stomach. Now the pressure's really on. The briefing room is shaped like half an amphitheater. 30 meters across, it has 100 stepped benches descending to a semicircular floor with a similarly shaped dais on it. There's a table on the dais, a lump cloth covering whatever is on it. The colonel seems to fill the room with his presence as we enter, all of us focusing our attention on him as we walk down the steps to the lowest benches. The others stand to attention in front of their places. Me to one side. The colonel waves us down and begins to pace us up and down. So far, you have been training blind, he tells us, scanning his ice cold eyes along the line. Now we begin to prepare for the mission in earnest. It is our task to assassinate an alien commander who has been causing the Emperor's servants considerable pain and has his own rulers at the same time. With their collaboration, we will infiltrate this base and kill him. He pulls the cloth back off the table to reveal a scale model of a bizarre looking building. I've never seen such an odd thing in my life. So I guess the scale, if I guess the scale correctly from the size of details like doors and windows, it's a massive dome, probably big enough to house a small town. The colonel removes the dome and places it to one side, revealing an open plan of the interior, divided into numerous large chambers, and beckons us to go over to look inside. The chambers look remarkably similar to training bays. Some of them have small, model jungle trees inside. One has a large replica of a beach, the other, what looks like the outskirts of an imperial city. This is the target area, the colonel explains. The aliens we are hunting are from a race called themselves. The alien we are hunting is from a race who call themselves the Tau. He has some unpronounceable heathen name, which I am assured by Alexis translates to something equivalent to Commander Brightsword. Now, this Brightsword virtually rules one of the Tau worlds, only a few weeks' travel from the Sacrasa system that falls within the Emperor's dominions. After several years, Brightsword has been very aggressively sending colonizing fleets into the wilderness space surrounding Sacrasa. We believe it is his intent to invade the system within the next 2 to 3 months. His superiors, the rulers of the so-called Tau Empire, wisely wish to avoid a bloody and costly war with our forces and have agreed to this cooperative strike. He pauses to let the weight of this settle in. These aliens, these Tau are helping us to kill one of their own commanders. Either they must be really scared of what they'll do, of what we'll do to their little empire if Brightsword goes ahead with his mad plan, or they really don't have much sense of loyalty to their own people. Excuse me, Colonel. Quidlin raises his hand slightly. Why are the Tau engaging in this mission with us, rather than simply removing Commander Brightsword from office, or perhaps covertly removing him themselves by other means? The Colonel waits a moment, probably while his brain catches up with Quidlin's quick-fire way of speaking. Unlike our own great Imperium, the Tau have no great emperor to bind them together, the Colonel explains, his lip curled in his face. They are godless, as far as we can tell, and have a strange concept which the Tau call the greater good. Their empire supposedly sustains itself through the harmony between all of its subjects, rather than by making supreme sacrifices the Emperor asks of us. As you might understand, with no such guiding hand, their empire is very fragile. Any hint that we are not those working towards this fictitious greater good undermines the whole basis for their society. They cannot admit to their citizens that one of their commanders is, in essence, a renegade. Similarly, they cannot risk being uncovered trying to assassinate that commander for the same reason. Thus, we have constructed a subterfuge which allows us, as outsiders, to kill Brightsword, posing as renegades rather than imperial servants. We can show them official records and provide witnesses if necessary. That will show that you are all military criminals. That is another reason why I am using scum like you. A half-truth is better than an outright lie. All this means that there will be no call for response against our forces. No blame will be traceable to either the Tau government nor the Emperor's loyal subjects. Very neat, I mutter, not realizing I had spoken out loud, until the Colonel darts at me with an evil glare. You have something to say, last chance? He asks scornfully, hands on his hips. Yes, Colonel, I tell him, standing upright and looking him in the eye. Killing aliens is something I can live with. Us killing aliens, I mean. Aliens helping us to kill aliens makes me suspicious. Besides, Colonel, this whole thing reminds me of Court Norm too much. All this infighting, I mean. Believe me when I say that this whole mission has been examined from every angle by myself and others, he retorts, looking around at all of us. We would be fools to trust the Tau, but you can be sure of that. However, the opportunity presented to the end to end the threat posed by Brightsword, whom we believe is fully intent on and capable of taking Circassa, is too good to pass up. Therefore, we will proceed, but with caution. He directs his attention to the miniature building on the table, and we close in again. This is a barracks and training area, what the Tau refer to as a battle dome, he informs us, leaning forward with his hands on the table. It also serves as the headquarters for Commander Brightsword. Currently, he is reviewing his forces on the newly colonized worlds around Circassa, but he will be performing an inspection of his troops at the Battle Dome before he leaves to join his fleet for the invasion. Before and after the parade, we will be beyond the reach. He will be beyond the reach of both of us and our Tau allies, so we will strike when he arrives to perform the inspection. I and a couple of the others nod approvingly. Any kind of hit like this, and believe me, I did a few back in Olympus during the trade wars, relies on surprise. I don't know how paranoid and security conscious these Tau are, but if they have people on the inside, it shouldn't be too difficult. What are all the different areas, Colonel? Asks Tanya, pointing at the various chambers. The Battle Dome is a training facility, sharpshooter, he replies. Just as on this ship, each of these training areas represents a different type of locale and can be modified to represent specific targets and objectives for an upcoming campaign. As our first diplomatic envoys to the Tau reported on the efficiency of these tactics, we sent agents to observe their military facilities. On this vessel and her sister ships, we have replicated the more laudable and practical aspects of their training methods. The Tau have a somewhat lax attitude to the perils presented by over-reliance on technology, so the Adeptus Mechanicus have been unable to duplicate the more arcane and blasphemous systems employed by the Tau. However, these ships represent our best training facilities we currently have at our disposal. Our tech priests are currently reconstructing 3 of the training bays to represent the battle zone that we are planning to trap and kill Brightsword in. He points toward an area at the center of the battle dome, where seems to be some kind of power system terminal, surrounded by a wide concourse, perhaps a parade ground or an embarkation level. When the new training bay is complete, we will begin operational training, he continues, standing up straight. Until then, we will go over the exact particulars of the mission, using the scale representation of the combat zone, and continue with your general training. Now pay attention to the plan. Flash flares. Oh. Flash flares and detonations explode across the pale yellow floors and walls, blinding in their intensity, and billowing a cloud of acrid smoke through the doorway where I'm crouched, an autogun gripped in my hands. As I've done a dozen times before over the last 2 weeks, I dive forward into the gloom, rolling through the smoke to the upper side of the corridor. I ripple off a burst of fire down the smoke-filled tunnel, covering for Quidlin and Strandisk as they dive after me, heading for the gateway a few meters behind me. I work my way towards them, crouched on my haunches, emptying the rest of the magazine with short bursts of fire at the silhouettes of possible targets moving backwards and forwards through the smoke. Sheltering the gateway, I pull out the mag and toss it away, smoothly pulling another from my weapons belt and slamming it home. I begin to count in my head. After I reach 20, I give the nod to Quidlin, who pulls out a las cutter from his pack and begins to burn his way through the armored gate. Sparks dance through the gate alcove, falling to my left arm and leg and spilling onto the floor. Rivulets of molten metal pour down the doorway and pool into the floor, cooling with a cloud of steam. I count to another 20 before leaning out of cover and firing on semi-auto for another 5 counts. I watch as Trost emerges from a doorway in front of me and dashes past, throwing himself in behind Tanya. "The door is open," Quidlin informs us, stepping back and delivering a sharp kick, knocking out a section of metal and leaving a space just high and wide enough to crawl through. Trost pokes his head through and then wriggles out of sight. "Clear on the other side," he calls back after a few seconds. I fire another burst down the corridor while Quidlin, then Tanya, follow the bomb expert, before turning and diving through myself. Pulling myself up on the other side, I glance around to check the concourse is clear of targets. "Cover smoke, demolition man," I snap to Trost, who pulls a grenade from the bandolier across his chest, primes it with a thumb, and hurls it into the center of the parade ground. It clears to a stop almost exactly halfway between our position and the door to the control chamber of the travel station. A moment later, bluish smoke gouts forth, quickly spilling across the wide area and obscuring visibility in every direction. "Let's move," I say to Tanya and Quidlin, dashing out from the gateway, the others pounding across the floor behind me. Tross stays behind to cover the hole in the gate. "Movement! Get down!" screams Tanya, diving to the floor beside me. I drop and roll, noticing something moving in the smoke out of the corner of my eye. I hear the sharp crack of Strandik's marksman rifle, followed by a scream of agony. "What the frag?" I hear Tross shout. No, "What the frag?" I hear Tross shout. "Since when do targets scream?" asks Quidlin from behind me. I get to my feet and dash over, keeping low. Quidlin just behind me. As I run through the smoke, I see something lying on the ground, a lump in shape. As I get closer, I see it's Sternberg, laid out flat, arms and legs splayed wide. A puddle of blood oozes from under him. Bending him over, I see the bullet hole in his left cheek. I roll his head to the side, and half his skull comes away in fragments. I feel something pluck weakly at my arm. "He's still alive." "Help me!" pleads Stromberg, his eyes wide, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the blood seeping from his cheek. He coughs and spits, pieces of shattered tooth spraying bloodily into his tunic. Quidlin is on his knees, fumbling for the medipack strapped to Stromberg's left thigh. "It'll be okay, Stitcher. It'll be okay," Quidlin says, pulling his knife out and cutting the medipack strap and tugging the bulky pouch free. I look at the side of Stromberg's face, or more precisely the gory, ragged remains of it, and wonder what's going through his mind as he stood and watched that damn tech priest digging around in my brain with a scalpel. Almost transfixed by the blood-bleeding fluid spilling from the wound, I reach forward tentatively with a finger. I'm about to paw the gray and crimson when Trost appears and grabs my wrist, pulling me away. "What the frag are you doing, last chance?" He snarls at me, hate in his eyes. "You are seriously cracking up. You need to be put out of your misery." I slap his hand away and push him back, snapping out of the trance. I turn back to Stronberg and crouch over him. Well, what should we do? What do we do, Stitcher? Quidlin asks desperately, spilling bandages, needles, tourniquets, and stims from the medipack across the floor. Stitcher, you have to tell me what to do. I don't know what any of this stuff is for. Green file, the surgeon replies, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. Need to drink it. Quidlin pulls the file and pulls the stopper out, pouring the contents into Stronberg's gaping mouth. The physician gags and chokes before swallowing it, blood frothy now, leaking from his nose as well. Pad and bandage, Stronberg gasped next, his finger flapping for the pile of stuff on the floor, using his touch to identify what he's after. We don't have time for this, I say suddenly, standing up and pulling Quidlin with me. What do you mean? Tross snarls hoarsely, a hand on my shoulder, twisting me to face him. We only have 5 minutes before the target will appear, I tell him calmly. Quidlin needs to lock down the rail carriage, and Tanya needs to be on the observation tower for the shot. Stitcher will die if we leave him, moans Quidlin, looking back at Stronberg, who's staring up at me with a glazed expression. You can't save him, I say, staring back at him. Let the butcher die. Quidlin stands there, stunned. Trost looks like I shot Stronberg myself. We have to call off the exercise, he growls. Oh, right, I snarl back. Like we'd call off the attack if this happens on the real mission. Don't be so fragging stupid. Now get back to the covering that doorway before I put a bullet through your head. And get sharpshooter to shift your ass over here. We need to get moving. You, I turn to Quidlin. Get into that control room and shut down the transport power. They all stand there like statues. Emperor, damn it! I curse, punching Tross square in the jaw and buckling him at his knees. Emperor, so help me! If you don't get moving now, I will break every bone in your fragging bodies. He stumbles away, cursing like a Navy raiding, and Quidlin hovers over for a moment before seeing the look in my eye. He grabs his gun from the floor and sprints over towards the entranceway. The smoke is beginning to thin, and I see Tross bent over him, talking to Strandisk, who sat on the ground by the looks of it. I run over them and catch the end of what Tross is saying. We'll kill you if you don't get moving, he's telling her, shaking her by the shoulder. He sees me approaching and legs it for the gateway now, unslinging his gun from his shoulder as he runs to the smoke. Tanya is sat cross-legged on the floor, staring straight ahead. On your feet, sharpshooter, I shout at her. Grab your weapon and come with me. She doesn't move a muscle, doesn't even blink. I snatch up her rifle and thrust it towards her, but it just falls out of her limp hands into her lap. Snarling, I grab a handful of tunic and drag her to her feet, where she stands swaying slightly, eyes still unfocused. Pick up your rifle, sharpshooter, I say to her slowly and deliberately. That is an order, soldier. She doesn't move. I stare down at her, right in the eye, my face nearly touching hers. There's nothing there at all. Her eyes staring through me at something in the distance I suspect only she can see. Never mind about me. Never mind about me, I say to her softly, calming myself down at the same time. If the colonel sees this, we'll both get shot. Don't you understand? You have to pick up your rifle. I grab the weapon and slowly ease it into her unresisting hands before closing her fingers around the stock. She stands there doing nothing, absolutely out of touch with everything around her. The gun clatters to the ground as I let go of her hand. Emperor, damn you! Snap out of it! I scream at her, smashing the back of my hand across her face, splitting her top lip. She sways and staggers for a second before righting herself. I see a glimmer of life in her eyes. A moment too late as her boot smashes up between my thighs and knocks me to the ground. Bastard! She screams, kicking me in the midriff as I roll around on the floor. I feel a rib crack under the blow. I don't want to shoot anyone again. Don't you understand? I'm not a killer. I'm not this true soldier you keep talking about. I'm never picking up a gun again. You can't turn me away. You can't turn me into a murderer. I sit up, clutching my ribs and wincing. Slowly, I push myself to my feet. I stare at Strandisk for a long, long time, my face expressionless. With a deliberate slowness, I reach down and pick up her sniper rifle. She eyes it with disgust, barely able to bring herself to look at it. I pull the slide and eject the spent casing. Why didn't you say we had why didn't you say we had live ammo? She asks quietly, looking at the cartridge on the floor. What'd you expect? I answer calmly. This is not some kind of game we're playing here. We're not doing this for fun, sharpshooter. Don't call me that, she snaps, recoiling away from me. I hate that name. It's who you are, I tell her viciously. That or a corpse, like Stronenberg. Don't you mean Stitcher? She replies sourly. When he was alive, he was useful. He was Stitcher, I say, glancing over my shoulder at his cooling corpse. Now he's just a useless lump of dead meat. I'm not sharpshooter. My name is Tanya Strandis, she argues. Do what you like to me. I'm not firing a gun again. I toss the rifle at her and she catches it easily. Her grip is loose and sure, used to handling the weapon without thinking. She looks down at it and drops it to the floor with a clatter. I pull the short stub out of my belt in fatigues and cock it in front of her face. I point at her between her eyes and move my finger to the trigger. Pick up your gun, sharpshooter, I warn her. She shakes her head. Pick it up, damn you. I don't want to kill you. I'd rather be dead, she tells me defiantly. Is that right? I say, uncocking the stubber and thrusting it back into my belt. I grab Tanya and drag her across the concourse to where Stromberg lies in a pool of deep red. That's what you look like. That's all you be, I snarl at her. She tries to look away, tears in her eyes. I grab her by the ear and push her to her knees next to Stronenberg. She gives a whimper as I pull out the stubber again and place it at the back of her head. Is this really what you want? I can't fire a gun again, she pleads, looking over her shoulder at me, her cheeks streaked with tears. I'm not asking you to fire it, Tanya, I say softly, lifting the gun away. I just need you to pick it up. She hesitates for a moment, wiping the back of her hand across her face. Then she gets to her feet, her eyes glancing at me, and I nod towards the rifle. I follow her as she walks over to it. She bends down, her hand hovering above it. Just pick it up, I prompt her, my voice level. Her hand closes around the barrel, and she pulls it to her. She stands there for a moment, holding it away from her like it's a poisonous snake or something. With an anguished cry, she falls to her knees, cradling the rifle to her chest. What have I done? She asks between sobs. You killed a man, I answer bluntly, turning away from her. The sight of her sickens me to the pit of my stomach. I'm going to have to hell to pay with the colonel over this whole fragged up mess. You killed a man, I say. It's what we do. You killed a man. I guess, like, most Warhammer characters are two-dimensional just because Warhammer is a very two-dimensional setting. there aren't really many characters in Warhammer, but there's many caricatures. But that's why the Last Chances are kind of cool, because they're just war criminals. That's it. They have no lives, they have no freedom outside of being a war criminal. As I expected, the colonel is less than happy with the day's events. In his cabin, which looks surprisingly familiar to the one aboard the Pride of Lothos, I guess he has his own furniture or something and brings it with him. The walls are paneled in deep red wood. Behind him is a glass fronted bookshelf with a handful of books on the top shelf. His plain desk and chair sit in the middle of the room, a pile of papers neatly stacked in one corner. Schaefer himself is pacing up and down behind the desk, his hands balled into fists behind his back. This was a simple training exercise, Kage. He growls at me, not even looking in my general direction, but pouring his scorn into the universe in general. Now my team has a dead medic and a sniper who will barely bring herself to hold a gun. He rounds on me at that point, and I can see that he is really, really angry. His eyes are like shards of glittering eyes. His jaw is tight and his whole body tensed. Stronenberg, I can live without, he admits angrily. But Stranisk, the whole plan we have devised relies on her making that shot. She will only get one chance at it. One chance. You promised me you would get her to fire that shot. And you, collapsing in the middle of an exercise and trying to kill yourself. What happened to the cage that was with me on I-Car 4? Where's the hardened killer that watched my back on Falls Hope? Where's the good soldier that was with me in Court Norham? Now, only weeks away, I'm going to have to inform my superiors that the whole mission has to be abandoned. He stops his tirade and takes a deep breath, turning away from me. I just stand there at attention, waiting for it to start again. My mind is reeling. I've got no idea what he's going to do next. Is he really going to call off the assassination? Is it his decision or someone else's? If he does, what happens to me and the last chancers? What happens to him? As these thoughts fly through my head, he turns back to me. I am very disappointed in you, Kage, he says solemnly, shaking his head. Very disappointed indeed. His words cut me more than any knife, and all I can do is hang my head in shame, because he's right to be disappointed. I failed. Climb faster, I bellow at Strandisk, standing at the bottom of one of the travel terminal's command towers in a mock-up battle dome. She's hauling herself up the side of the building on a rope, painfully slowly in my eyes. You've got 30 seconds to reach the top from start to finish. Climb faster. She glances back down over her shoulder at me before renewing her efforts, her tired arms dragging her slowly, meter by meter, up towards the observation center. I can't see why this is so necessary, last chance, considering there are stairways up the tower. Quidlin. I can't see why this is so necessary, last chance, considering there are stairways inside the tower, Quidlin says, standing next to me, looking up. Is this supposed to be some kind of punishment, perhaps? No, this isn't a punishment, Brains, I reply, keeping my eyes on Tanya. This is called playing it safe. If something goes wrong and you can't open the doors of the terminal for some reason, I want there to be a backup plan. Sharpshooter has to be in position for that kill, whatever happens to the rest of us. Tanya is only a couple of meters from the top now, but slowing badly. All it needs is one final effort and she'll be up, but she just hangs there, exhausted. Okay, this is the 10th time she's made that climb in the last hour. But she needs to build up the right muscles. Morik is standing beside me on the other side, intently looking at the climbing figure. She'll fall, he says simply, glancing at me out of the corner of his eye. I think losing our sniper right now would be a bad thing. He's right. The rope is swaying badly, and it looks as if she can only just hang on. Never mind climbing any further. Motivate her, I tell Morik, crossing my arms. He pulls his las pistol and readies it, the gun emitting a short, high-pitched whine, and the power cell warms up. Sharpshooter, listen to me, he bellows. Oh, sharpshooter, listen to me, he bellows, deafening me. His voice could carry through an artillery barrage in a thunderstorm. I am going to count to three, and then I'm going to shoot you if you're still hanging on that rope. She glances back and sees him turn side on and raise his pistol towards her, assuming a dueling stance, and sighting down the length of his arm. He stands as still as a rock, attention fixed on the struggling woman. One! He shouts out. Tanya begins to haul herself up once more, reaching deep into her reserves of energy, dragging herself painfully up the rope. Two! He continues, not moving a muscle except to adjust his aim higher. Tanya gets a hand on the rim around the top of the building, the other. She pulls herself onto the edge and then rolls over, disappearing from view. I turn to Morik and nod appreciatively. Tanya pops her head over and hurls abuse down at us, waving an angry fist. And you think I'm a cruel training officer, I comment to Quidlin, shouldering my autogun and heading off towards the tower door. The difference is I wouldn't have fired. The difference is I wouldn't have fired, Morik calls out as I walk away. You would have. I stop and turn towards them, looking at Quidlin, then Morik. That's true. I agree with a nonchalant shrug. Strelly lunges at me with a knife, making a jab towards my midriff. The attack is slow and fast, but I manage to step back, using the side of my right arm to deflect his hand away before stepping back in and driving my fingers through his throat. He sways back, the blow falling just short, and he tries to chop down on my wrist with his left hand. I roll my wrist over his and grab his arm, dragging him forwards onto my knee, which he jumps at the last second, performing a forward tumble and rolling to his feet. We stand there panting for a few seconds, eyeing each other warily. Okay, that's good, I tell him, stepping away and wiping sweat from my forehead with the sleeve of my tunic. Quidlin and Isle, you're next. The two of them circle each other, blades held back, away from the enemy until they're ready to strike. Isle feints to the left and slips around to the right, but Quidlin's not fooled and meets the move, dropping low and driving his foot into Isle's left knee. The scout stumbles but recovers quickly enough to leap aside as Quidlin lunges for him. Isle rams his fist into the small of Quidlin's back, knocking him forward, but Quidlin turns the blow into a roll, rising up and spinning on the spot with an easy motion, a grimace on his face. The mechanic tosses the knife into his left hand and makes a slash at Isle, who is forced to dance back a couple of steps. Quidlin follows up immediately, switching hands again. Isle tries to take the initiative back and makes a sloppy stab. Quidlin easily avoids it, trapping Isle's knife arm against his body and dragging him forwards onto his own blade. Isle gives a startled cry and flops sideways, pulling the blade out of Quidlin's hand. He sits there on the mat, legs out in front of him, blood pouring down his stomach and pooling on his lap. Good blow, Brains. Now finish him, I say, my voice quiet. Quidlin glances at me, a confused look on my face. Isle pulls the knife free and lets it drop from his blood-slicked fingers. Last chance? Quidlin asks, taking a step towards me. I toss him my own knife, which he catches easily, and I point at Isle. Finish him, I say with a shallow nod towards the wounded man. Isle stares at me with a look of fear, still holding his guts. He tries to say something, but croaks hoarsely, glancing between me and Quidlin. I see understanding dawn on him, and a look of determination crosses his face. Do it, Brains, hisses Tross from my left, eager for blood. Leave him be, Tanya argues from the other side, darting a murderous look at me. Don't do it, Brains. He won't, I hear Strelly mutter, standing to one side, arms casually crossed. He hasn't got the instinct for it. Quidlin's still looking at me, a shallow frown cresting his brow. He looks back at Isle and me. I just frown. He turns away and takes a step towards Isle. I'll make you eat the fragging thing, Isle gasps, trying to push himself to his feet. It's a good attempt, I'll give him that. With that wound, he'll get nowhere. Quidlin takes a running step and kicks Isle down square in the face, smashing him to his back. He leaps on top of him, driving a blocky fist in the scout's nose. Winded and concussed, Isle can do nothing as Quidlin forces his head to the ground and pushes his knife deep under the chin. Quidlin closes his eyes and thrusts, sliding the blade through Isle's mouth and into his brain. Just as slowly, he pulls it out and stands up, facing away from me, the bloody dagger in his hand. I can't believe he actually did it, exclaims Australia in astonishment. Maybe brains aren't all you've got. I look at Isle's corpse and nod to myself. He died like a soldier. He died fighting for his life, not begging for it. I can respect that. You murdered eyes, you scum! Tanya shrieks at Quidlin, turning away in disgust. No, Quidlin replies, slowly turning to face us. A splash of blood across his face. His voice is flat, his expression blank. I was just following orders. Welcome to being a true soldier, Brains, I tell him, stepping forwards and clapping him on the shoulder. This seems like a fool way to get a lot of men killed, if you excuse my plain speaking, Lord. He was standing with a robed inquisitor in the shuttle bay of the Imperial transport Pride of Lothos. His bullet head and broad shoulders gave him a brutal look, but his soft-spoken burr and quick eyes betrayed the fact that he was far smarter than he looked. Dressed in a simple uniform of black and gray camouflage, Captain Destrian was a tall, imposing figure. Yet the elderly man with whom he was speaking seemed to command much more attention. The black robes that he wore were a mark of the Adeptus Terra, the priesthood of Earth. Yet Destrian was not fooled. This was no administrative bureaucrat. No Adept of Terra carried themselves with such authority and confidence, yet with no hint of pompousness or pride. No, though he chose to act as something else, the captain knew full well that he spoke to a member of the Inquisition, and the Inquisitor knew it too. I agree that your orders are highly irregular, Captain. One might even say unorthodox, the Inquisitor said with a smile, leaning heavily on his cane. Be that as it may, these are your orders, and you have been countersigned by your own superiors, including War Master Bane himself. Desterin stiffened at the mention of Bane, War Master and overall commander of the Imperial forces in the Sakrasa region. The Inquisitor wasn't playing around. He had organized this thoroughly, from the top down. You're right, those are my orders, and I'll follow them. But don't expect me to like it, complained Dresden, knowing that any argument was useless, but wishing to make his protest full all the same. We'll all be here for another week at least, while we resupply. I believe there are several lighters currently waiting to dock as we speak, the Inquisitor countered, still with the same polite smile on his face. I thought it would be necessary to resolve this matter as expeditiously as possible, and brought some of my influence to bear on the Departamentorium on your behalf. I believe that the new uniforms and equipment specified in your orders are abroad. See that they are issued to your men in due course. I could nail a fog cloud to a wall. I just bet you could nail a fog cloud to a wall, couldn't you, Lord? Destrian answers grumpily. He was well and truly concerned here. He'd been hoping to use the week to get in contact with War Master Bane and try to get this assignment shoved onto someone else. But the Inquisitor was one step ahead of them all the way. Yes, and tiptoe along the threads of spider web as well, Captain, the Inquisitor replied, his voice suddenly harsh and ominous too. No trace of the previous smile. He pointed his cane at Dresden. Remember that you are not to speak of the detail of your orders to anyone at all, until you are en route to the target. Once there, you will open the second set of sealed orders and follow them to the letter. Is that absolutely clear? To the letter, Lord, Dresden parroted heavily. Good. The Inquisitor's smile had returned as easily as it disappeared. Now I must be on my way. I wish you the Emperor's speed and good luck, Captain.